Alright, so this is the new Edge MTB from Garmin, and this is their purpose-built edge bike computer specifically designed for mountain biking with a ruggedized case, a smaller form factor than their Edge 540 and 840, as well as new downhill and enduro sport profiles with a new 5 Hz recording mode for increased accuracy. Now, this new Edge MTB is kind of a blend of their Edge 130, their Edge 540, as well as a couple features from their Edge 1050. So it's really about taking specific features from each of those and making an edge that's optimized for mountain biking, but this computer can still be used for all kinds of riding. So while it does have the MTB name, you may still want this computer just for the smaller size and weight. Now, this new Edge MTB isn't a new version of the 540, so this isn't really like an Edge 550 or anything like that. It has a lot of the features from the 540, but you can basically think of it as packing a lot of the features from the 540 into a smaller and more durable case, plus adding some features that are specifically designed for mountain biking. So in this video, we're going to go over everything new with this new purpose-built Edge bike computer, where I tested it for all kinds of riding, whether that's regular old mountain biking, some enduro style trail riding, some downhill laps of the park, and even some road and gravel just to see how it performs. And if you do happen to find the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just hit that like button down below. It's a small thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel out quite a bit, and I appreciate it. Alright, so what they did here with the Edge MTB is create a ruggedized version of an Edge, which kind of splits the difference between their Edge 540 and their Edge 130. And it's this kind of nice ideal size for a mountain biking computer where it's small enough to be kind of out of the way while still having a screen that's large enough where you'll still be able to see it. And the MTB uses a transflective display just like their Edge 540, so this kind of display excels outside in direct sunlight where it actually gets better and better with more sun. And the display is going to be protected by Gorilla Glass, so there's a bit of scratch resistance there, but it is also a flat display, so you could probably also put a screen protector on it at some point if you wanted a little bit more protection. Now for the display size, well, I think it's a really good size for this size bike computer, but I also do feel like the bezels are a little bit thick here. I usually don't comment about bezels all that much unless they're kind of noticeable, but it just seems to me that there could have been a little bit better ratio of the display to the case itself here. And then for weight, so the MTB comes in at 57 grams, the Edge 540 comes in at 81 grams, the Edge 130 Plus comes in at 33 grams, and then for some other comparisons, the Wahoo Element Bolt 3 is 85 grams, and the Edge Explorer is 104 grams. But the entire edge of this, well, Edge MTB is kind of like rubber coated, so there's definitely more durability built in here. And then the buttons are also rubber coated as well. And then one more thing is that it does also come with a replaceable quarter turn mount on the bottom in case you break it on a crash. And then to get around the device, so it has the same 7-button configuration as all of Garmin's other non-touchscreen devices, where the upper left-hand button is your power button. There's up and down buttons on the left-hand side below that. And then the upper right-hand button is your enter button. The lower right-hand button is your back button. And then the bottom right-hand button is your start and pause button, and then the bottom left is your lap button. Another thing that's similar between this and the 540 is that this doesn't have a touchscreen like what's found on their 840. Being that this is a smaller device though, I'm kind of okay with that, considering a touchscreen with this size of display wouldn't really be all that awesome of an experience. But one thing I would say about having an all button interface without a touchscreen is that it can take quite a few button presses to get to particular points in the interface, where it's definitely a lot faster to do on their Edge 840 with the touchscreen. But for the buttons themselves, these are a lot nicer in my opinion versus the 540 and 840 for that matter, where they're a little more pronounced. But what makes the bigger difference for me at least is that they're rubber coated, where they're just kind of like nice and grippy. And then for mount, so the Edge MTB comes with their mountain bike mount naturally. So this is a handlebar clamp mount that's able to rotate to accommodate for different handlebar configurations. So this works with a variety of stem lengths, including like short stubby stems. And there's really a lot of options of how you can actually use this mount, even as an out front mount. Something new though with the Edge MTB is that it comes with this new top tube mount, and this is a pretty slick mount for the most part, where it allows you to mount it to your top tube on all kinds of bikes, where you can use this included strap to attach it to basically any bike that you want. But they also made it so you can attach it to a bento box bolt, so if you happen to have one of those in your bikes, you can just bolt it into place, which is pretty slick. And being someone that usually has more than one bike computer when I'm riding, I love this, but it's not just for me. So this just frees up space in your handlebars, and it's actually a bit safer location for your computer as well, where it's less susceptible to damage in case of a crash. Now, while I love the way I can attach this to a top tube bolt, I'm not really in love with this strap attachment. So to mount it using this strap, so you'll slide the strap through the base plate, wrap around your top tube, and then loop it back onto itself, and it stays in place with this little notch on the buckle. So this notch is really what I'm not necessarily a fan of. So if you don't have it positioned correctly, you may actually hit your knee on it, which I've done actually numerous times while riding with this. I think there's really 2 ways to avoid this though, and that's to have the notch underneath the down tube or possibly even as close to the top tube as possible. The issue with having the notch below the top tube though is that then there's a bunch of extra strap kind of hanging off depending on the thickness of your top tube. I sort of think that they may have overthought this whole strap situation where I would have just loved to see something like a simple Velcro strap. The strap definitely keeps it super secure, but it just seems a little bit bulky and could possibly get in the way depending on how you ride. This base plate, however, can be used with any other Edge bike computer, by the way, where this is their standard quarter turn mount, which is replaceable. And it also does have two different options for the rubber base to accommodate for different top tube shapes. And the rubber definitely helps it keep super secure, as well as protect the paint on your top tube. And they will be selling this top tube accessory as an aftermarket accessory. One thing that actually does not come with this though is the standard puck style mount that usually comes with their other Edge bike computers. They definitely provide some good options here with the MTB mount as well as a top tube mount, but I found it a little bit strange to not see the standard rubber style mount here. And then for battery life, so they claim that the MTB can last up to 14 hours in what they're calling their demanding use case, or up to 26 hours in their battery saver mode. And for how this played out in real life, so I had a range of anywhere from 9% per hour all the way to 6.4% per hour. And in the majority of these rides, I was using both a power meter as well as an external heart rate sensor. However, I was not using navigation on any of these rides, which can generally decrease battery life even more. Now, Garmin is actually pretty conservative when it comes to their battery life claims, so I was expecting a little bit more here, but I think there's probably two things to consider is that I was running pre-release software, and I was also doing a lot of screen recording on some of these rides. Still though, it was able to get above that 14-hour claim, at least on a couple rides. Alright, so now let's get into some of the new features with the MTB. So there's a new timing gates feature, which is pretty similar to the timing gates feature that they just rolled out with their Forerunner 970, and what this allows you to do is basically set up segments on the fly where you'll be able to see how fast you are on different sections, and this can be used for any kind of riding, by the way, not just mountain biking. And for how you set this up, so I actually filmed this on a road segment as it's just much easier to show you how to do this on the road versus the trail, but the concept is going to be the same whether on a road or the trail. So to set up a timing gate sequence, you'll press the upper right hand button when you're on a time-based page, so basically any page other than the map page, and here's where you see a timing gates option. From here, the first thing you want to do is create a timing gate series, and it'll ask you if you're walking or riding. And at first I thought this was just maybe a bug or something to show walking here, but this actually does make sense, especially on downhill courses where you'll sometimes pre-walk sections to figure out the best lines. Anyhow, from here, it shows some instructions on how to mark timing gates by holding the lap key at any time where you want to mark a gate. And then when you approach the first point where you want to mark the start of your gates, you just long press the lap key and it brings up a prompt where you can tag that gate. And then basically just rinse and repeat for all the gates that you actually want to set up. And you can set up to 10 different gates in a series. And then once you're setting up your gate series, you'll just want to save the series to your device. And then to use the timing gate series, you'll just press the upper right hand button to get back to the timing gate options, and then you can choose the timing gate series you want to use. And for the experience of using these gates, so you'll first be able to see these gates on the map, which is kind of nice to see, and you'll also be able to see the distance to that gate on the map page as well. And then when you cross a gate, a screen will pop up showing the time ahead or behind you are on that segment, with this color-coded portion in the center which is labeled Delta, with red meaning that you're behind your last split time, or green if you're ahead. And then once you're done with that segment, you'll be able to see your split performance compared to the best time that you achieved so far. And I think this is a pretty cool feature overall, which could totally be used for both mountain biking as well as road biking, or gravel biking for that matter, where with mountain biking, you could use it to figure out the best lines and see how different line choices impact your times. And with road biking, totally useful from an interval perspective as well on different segments. And you'll also be able to see all this information collected in Garmin Connect after you're done with all your split information, so you can analyze all this later. The only thing I'd like to see here though is some sort of virtual partner type thing in addition to your delta showing a projected finish time for each segment. So like a countdown timer of sorts with the projected time left on that segment. And then moving on to the new mountain biking specific features. So they've introduced new enduro and downhill sport profiles, and these aren't just new names or classifications. These actually have specific features designed for each of these disciplines. So with the new enduro profile, so this allows you to break out both your ascent and descent phases during your ride. So this could be super useful for both pre-riding enduro courses, but also the actual events themselves. So when you go to start your ride using the enduro profile, it'll first ask you which phase you'll be starting, whether that's going to be an ascent or descent. And then as you start your ascent, it'll just show specific data that's applicable just for the ascent. And then once you're at the top of your climb, all you'll do is press the lap button to switch over to a descent phase, but there's actually something else that happens here. It'll switch into its higher accuracy 5 Hz recording mode, which is kind of indicated in purple here with this little icon. Now we'll get into whether or not this new 5 Hz recording mode is actually more accurate here in just a bit, but let's finish up with how this enduro profile works, as well as how it differs from the downhill profile. Anyhow, once you're done with your ride, it'll break out the stats for both your ascent as well as descent phases, as well as how many laps or segments that you had on your ride. And this is actually very similar, by the way, to how their backcountry ski profile works on their outdoor focus watches, where it can break out your skin up as well as your descent. Okay, so for the new Downhole Profile, so this is basically repurposing their alpine skiing profile from their watches, where this can automatically track your runs. And how this works is that it's using the built-in altimeter to detect when you're ascending on the chairlift, and then when you get off the chairlift and start descending, it knows that as well based on the altimeter data, and it just automatically switches to the descent phase. And this works exactly how it's supposed to, where it did a good job on this day out here where it detected all my runs automatically. The only difference I really saw here is that it seemed to be not quite as quick as switching over from each of the profiles as quickly as their watches do, where it took about like maybe 20 seconds or so to detect when I was either ascending on the lift as well as getting off the lift and starting to go downhill. Now, the big difference between the downhill and enduro profiles is that the downhill profile automatically switches between ascent and descent phases, where you'll manually press the lap button on the enduro profile to switch between the phases. And I think this does make sense, as there can be portions of an enduro segment where you do have to climb, even though it's part of the downhill segment. But with the descent phases on the downhole profile, so this will also automatically engage the 5 Hz recording mode, just like the descent phases on the enduro profile. Okay, so for what this new 5 Hz recording mode does, so what this does is that it takes more frequent samples of GPS or GNSS data, where it's taking samples 5 times a second versus the 1 second recording interval that usually happens. And the aim here is to deliver higher accuracy with GPS tracks, which could result in better speed and distance measurements. And this really does come into play with mountain biking scenarios, where you'll oftentimes have tight switchbacks where standard 1 second plots can sometimes be spaced kind of far apart, which may not accurately reflect location as well as distance. And the other area where this may come into play is with high speed descents, where if you're going around a corner at high speed, the 1 second recording rate may not be able to actually keep up with your speed around the corner, and it can kind of overshoot it. Now, in terms of it's actually more accurate, well, definitely. You can definitely see here from all these examples compared to an Edge 840 that the sampling rate was much higher, resulting in a much smoother and more accurate plot. Now, if it actually makes a difference though, well, with downhill, the track certainly reflected the higher accuracy at higher speeds, but it also had a higher maximum speed, which may have had something to do with that 5 Hz recording rate, but it's not like any of the other devices were way off from each other either. But then another test I did was with the Enduro Profile, where on the first lap at one of my favorite trails ever, I used the Enduro Profile where it tracked the ascent as well as descent phase, where it could kick in that 5 Hz recording mode. But after that first lap, I actually did another lap just to use the normal mountain bike profile, where it wouldn't be using the 5 Hz recording mode, just to see the difference. And for the actual tracks, there's definitely a difference for sure, but the Edge 840 as well as the Wahoo Element Bolt 3 also did a great job with these tight corners and curves. The Edge MTB was definitely smoother for sure, but I wouldn't necessarily call it like way different either. And it also didn't necessarily translate into different distances that were collected either between the different laps using the mountain bike profile as well as the enduro profile. So while the 5 Hz recording mode definitely does its job and is definitely more accurate than the 1 second interval recording, I think it's really going to depend on your use case and how useful it'll be, where I think it's definitely going to be a lot more useful for downhill versus enduro, where they're just much higher speeds with downhill. Now, one important thing to note here with the 5 Hz recording in the enduro mode, so it will only enable the 5 Hz recording option if it's actually detecting a descent. So even if you toggle it into descent mode using the lap button, if you're still climbing or on flat ground, it'll default to a 1 Hz mode. It has to be detecting a descent for it to be recording in 5 Hz. And with these new features, by the way, so the 5 Hz recording mode will come to the Edge 1050 later on with a software update, as the 1050 does have the necessary hardware for this feature, but it won't be coming to other Edges due to differences in chipsets. And with the new mountain bike profiles as well as some of the fork side enhancements, these will also be coming to the 1050 in that same update. Now, in terms of the rest of the features of this device, so this is going to be pretty similar to the Edge 540 for the most part, where there's full offline topo maps and it has 32 GB of storage for those maps. There's full navigation and routing. It has both Climb Pro for routes as well as Freeride Climb Pro, where it can try to predict where you're headed and give you a preview of the suffering that's going to be ahead. There's also Trail Forks integration with their Fork Sight feature, where when you come to a stop, it'll actually show you trail junctions and trails that are close by, along with distance, elevation, as well as trail ratings. And you'll also be able to see a breakdown of trail ratings when you save your activity. Now, there are some features though that the 540 has that don't come on the Edge MTB. So for instance, their Climb Pro Explore feature. So what this does is that it can show you climbs around your vicinity. So it's basically showing you like kind of a buffet of suffering that you have available to you at a given time. The MTB still has their actual Climb Pro feature though, which is really a lot more useful than their Explore feature, but it just doesn't have that Explore function where it shows you climbs around you. Hope that kind of makes sense. And then another difference is that the Edge MTB doesn't have Wi-Fi, so for map downloads, you'll need to plug it into your computer, but honestly, it's going to be way faster to do it through your computer versus Garmin Express versus over Wi-Fi anyways. And there's also some other differences between the 540 and Edge MTB as well, like it doesn't have some training features like their Power Guide feature, there's no training feedback like training status and load focus, as well as some other race focus features. And this is kind of one of those things where as soon as I started to dive into these differences, I discovered it was basically like their Garmin watches. This was a deep rabbit up a whole lot of differences, which I'm going to have to follow up with an in-depth comparison that'll be coming up soon. And in terms of pricing, so the Edge MTB runs $399, and if you look at the pricing of the 540, well, that's definitely a bit more for this purpose-built Edge. Is it more accurate? Definitely. Is it more durable? Very much so. But the 540 and the MTB, they actually do share quite a bit in common, so the pricing seems just a little bit high on this for me. Now, we definitely need to take tariffs into consideration here, where I'd say with most recent Garmin devices, they've seemed to be about $50 more than what I would probably expect, so I think tariffs really could be playing a factor here. But I do like this computer a lot, so I love the rugged case, the buttons are also fantastic, and I just love the size where it's just out of the way while still providing all the data I need. Anyhow, if you found the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just hit that like button down below, and also be on the lookout for tons more videos that are right around the corner. June is turning out to be just as hot as September when it comes to sports tech, so make sure to hit that bell icon next to the subscribe button to get notified of all the new stuff that's dropping soon. In the meantime, happy riding, and we will see you in the next video.